My mother took the microphone at my rehearsal dinner and called herself the woman who gave birth to me, while my actual birth mother sat 10 feet away with her hands folded around a water glass. For 1 second, the whole room stayed polite, because nobody understood the damage yet. My fiancé, Ben, turned toward me, with that careful half-smile people use when they think they missed a joke. His parents sat still at the long table under the string lights. My adoptive mother, Elaine, stood beside the fireplace in her navy dress, holding the microphone like she had been waiting 31 years for someone to hand it to her. "I know weddings are about the bride and groom," Elaine said, smiling at all 80 people in the private room of the restaurant. "But as Claire's birth mother, I just want to say I never imagined this day would come so fast." My fork hit my plate. It was not loud, but Ruth heard it. Ruth was the woman who had given birth to me in a county hospital outside Dayton and signed the papers 2 days later with a social worker sitting beside her. I had met her 8 months before the wedding, after years of telling myself I did not need to know where my face came from. She had not asked for anything. She had not tried to take a title. She had worn a pale gray dress tonight and brought a small card for Ben. Because she said she did not know the rules yet. Elaine knew all of that. Elaine had helped me choose the rehearsal dinner menu. Elaine had watched me write Ruth's name on the seating chart. Elaine had stood in my kitchen 3 weeks earlier and said, "I can share one weekend. I'm not a monster." Now she lifted her free hand toward me, glowing under the warm lights, as if she had just blessed the room. "I held Claire first in every way that mattered," she said. "So if anyone wonders who her real mother is, you're looking at her." People clapped because people clap when a woman with good makeup and a trembling voice asks them to. The sound came at me in pieces. Ben's college friends near the bar, my coworkers by the windows, Elaine's church friends, who had known me since I was a baby and had always treated my adoption like a miracle story that belonged mostly to them. Ruth did not clap. She did not make a scene either. She just set her water glass down very carefully, like the table might bruise. I should have stood up right then. I can say that now. I should have taken the microphone and said, "Elaine raised me. Ruth gave birth to me. Those are both true, and we are not rewriting them tonight." It would have been one clean sentence. It would have saved Ruth from sitting there while a room full of strangers applauded the theft of her only plain fact. But I had spent my life learning how to rescue Elaine from feelings she created. So I sat there with my cheeks burning and my napkin twisted in my lap. Ben leaned close. "Do you want me to do something?" I shook my head because I did not trust my voice. That was my first mistake of the night. Elaine kept talking. She told the story of the day she and my dad brought me home, how I was so small my newborn socks slid off, how she had slept in the nursery chair for a week, because she was afraid I would stop breathing if she closed her eyes. It was a beautiful story. It was also not the story she had claimed to be telling. Every sentence made the lie easier for the room to accept, because love sounds like truth when it is delivered with confidence. Across the table, Ruth looked down at her plate. She had barely touched her salmon. Earlier, before everyone arrived, she had asked me if she should call herself a family friend if anyone got confused. I had laughed too quickly and said, "No. You're allowed to be here as yourself." She had nodded, relieved, and tapped 2 fingers once against her glass. I had noticed because I do the same thing when I am trying not to bolt. Elaine ended her speech by raising her champagne. "To Claire and Ben," she said, "and to the family that loved her first." That last word landed like a slap. The room toasted. Chairs scraped. Conversation rushed back in, louder than before, because awkward people love noise. Elaine handed the microphone to the restaurant manager and came straight to me. She bent down, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Don't look at me like that." Her perfume was the same one she wore to every important event, powdery and sharp. For a second, I was 8 years old again, standing in a department store while she cried, because I had wandered one aisle over. Back then, I had learned that my fear mattered less than her panic. That habit rose in me now, old and obedient. "You said birth mother," I whispered. Elaine's smile stayed bright for anyone watching. "Not now." "Ruth is right there." Elaine squeezed my shoulder hard enough that her ring pressed into my skin. I said not now. Then she moved on to hug Ben, and the people around us relaxed because Elaine had decided the moment was over. Ruth excused herself 5 minutes later. She did it so quietly that only I saw her stand. She slid her chair in, picked up her small silver purse, and walked toward the hallway near the restrooms. Nobody stopped her. Nobody knew they should. I pushed my chair back, but Elaine's best friend, Marcy appeared beside me with damp eyes and a glass of white wine. "Your mom's speech," she said. "Honey, I'm wrecked, just wrecked." I looked at the hallway where Ruth had gone. "Excuse me." Marcy touched my arm. "I know this weekend must be complicated with that other woman here." That other woman. The words did something useful. They burned through the fog. I pulled my arm away, not roughly, but clearly. "Her name is Ruth." Marcy blinked. "Of course. I just meant—" "I know what you meant." It was the smallest correction in the world, but my heart was pounding as if I had broken a window. Ben saw my face and started to rise, but I shook my head again. This time it meant stay, not save me. I found Ruth in the narrow hallway near the coat hooks. She was not crying. Somehow that made me feel worse. She was standing beneath a framed black and white photograph of the restaurant from the 1940s, pressing the edge of her thumb into the clasp of her purse. "I'm sorry," I said. Ruth looked up at me. Her eyes were clear, but her mouth was tight. "You don't have to apologize for her." "Yes, I do, apparently. I invited you into this." "You invited me to dinner," she said. "Not to a contest." That was the first time I heard anger in her voice. Not loud anger. Not messy anger. Just a clean line drawn across the floor. I leaned against the wall because my knees felt unreliable. "She promised me she was okay." Ruth gave a small, tired smile. "People promise what they wish were true." From the dining room, Elaine's laugh rose above the other voices. Ruth heard it too. She looked toward the sound, then back at me, and I saw her make a decision. "I need to tell you something before tomorrow," she said. My stomach tightened. "About what?" Ruth glanced down the hall, where shadows from the dining room moved across the carpet. "Not here." Not with her walking in and out. Before I could answer, Elaine appeared at the end of the hallway with 2 champagne glasses in her hands. Elaine lifted the 2 champagne glasses like she had caught Ruth and me doing something rude, instead of trying to finish a sentence she had interrupted. She walked toward us with her rehearsal dinner smile still fixed in place, but her eyes had gone flat. Behind her, the restaurant doorway glowed warm and loud, full of clinking forks and people who still thought my mother had given a sweet speech. In the hallway, it was just Ruth with her hand on her purse, me with Elaine's ring mark still burning in my shoulder, and Elaine carrying drinks no one had asked for. "There you are," Elaine said. "I was worried you two had wandered off." She offered 1 glass to me and 1 to Ruth. "Come back in, they're about to do dessert." Ruth did not take the glass. She stood very still, which somehow made Elaine look busier and smaller. "Claire and I need a minute," Ruth said. Elaine laughed once, soft and sharp. "Claire is the bride. Everybody needs a minute with Claire tonight." Then she turned the smile on me. "Honey, Ben's grandmother is asking for you. You don't want to be rude." There it was. Not a command, not exactly. A little string tied to the part of me that had been trained to move when Elaine tugged. For most of my life, if Elaine said I was being rude, I stopped whatever I was doing and made her feel safe again. I almost did it then. I could feel my body preparing to apologize before my mind caught up. But Ruth's face stopped me. Not because she looked dramatic, because she didn't. She looked like a woman who had learned the cost of asking for too much, and had decided to ask anyway. "I'll come back in a minute," I told Elaine. Elaine's smile cracked. "No. You'll come back now. This is not the time for side conversations." The word no landed harder than it should have. Maybe because she had said it in the same tone she used when I was a child reaching for a hot stove. Ruth looked down at the champagne in Elaine's hands, then up at me, and I understood that if I let Elaine pull me back into that room, Ruth would leave before I heard whatever she had come into the hallway to say. I reached for the closest door. It opened into a small coat room with empty hangers, a stack of booster seats, and a smell of lemon cleaner. It was not private enough, but it was ours if I chose it. I stepped inside and held the door. "Ruth, please." Elaine moved first. She put 1 champagne glass on a narrow shelf and caught the edge of the door with her free hand. "Absolutely not." I looked at her fingers on the door. Her nails were pale pink for my wedding weekend. She had picked that color after texting me 3 options, then getting offended when I did not answer fast enough. That tiny memory flashed through me, ridiculous and clear, and it made the moment feel less like a storm and more like a pattern I could finally see. "Take your hand off the door," I said. Elaine blinked. "Excuse me?" "Take your hand off the door." My voice shook, but the words stayed standing. Elaine stared at me as if I had spoken in a language she did not allow in our family. For 1 second, I thought she might push past me. Then Ben appeared at the end of the hall, his tie loosened, his face changed by whatever he saw in mine. "Claire," he said. Elaine turned quickly. "Ben, good. Please tell your bride people are waiting." Ben did not look at Elaine. He looked at my shoulder first, where I had been rubbing the sore spot without realizing it. Then he looked at the coat room door and Ruth's pale face. "Do you want me to keep people busy?" he asked me. That question loosened something in my chest. He did not ask Elaine what was happening. He did not try to referee. He asked me what I wanted. "Yes," I said. 10 minutes. Elaine's jaw tightened. "This is absurd." Ben stepped beside her, not blocking her, just changing the shape of the hallway. "I'll tell them Claire needed air." "That makes it sound like something is wrong," Elaine said. "Something is," Ben said. He said it calmly, but it stopped all three of us. Elaine's face flushed. Ruth looked away, not victorious, not relieved, just tired. I backed into the coat room, and this time Elaine did not hold the door. When it shut, the restaurant noise dropped to a muffled wave, and I could hear my own breathing. The coat room was too small for what Ruth had to tell me. We stood between winter coats left by guests who had expected a normal June evening in an over-air-conditioned restaurant. A child's navy hoodie had fallen off a hanger and lay on the floor near Ruth's shoe. Ruth noticed it too. She bent and picked it up, smoothing the sleeves before hanging it back. The gesture was so gentle that I almost cried. "I'm sorry," I said again, because it was the only sentence I could find. Ruth shook her head. "Don't spend our minute on that. What did you need to tell me?" She held the strap of her purse with both hands. "I need you to hear this before tomorrow, because after that speech, I don't know what story you're standing inside." My stomach tightened. "What story?" Ruth swallowed. "When I placed you, I asked for one thing that wasn't medical and wasn't legal. I asked the social worker to tell your parents that I had named you for the 2 days I had you, just so they would know you had been called something with love before you became theirs." I waited. I had expected a warning about Elaine. I had expected maybe an old slight, an argument, a boundary Ruth had never told me about. I had not expected my own beginning to enter the room like another person. "What was it?" I asked. Ruth's eyes filled, but her voice stayed steady. "Lila." The name hit me softly and then kept going. Lila. Not because I wanted to be called that now. Not because it felt more mine than Claire. It hit because I had never known there had been a sound in the world for me before Elaine and my dad drove me home. I had always imagined myself as paperwork, a baby in a blanket, a space waiting to be filled. Ruth was telling me I had not been blank. "I didn't know," I said. "I know." Ruth looked toward the door. But Elaine did. The coat room seemed to shrink. "How do you know?" "Because I met her once before tonight," Ruth said. "Not officially. Not through an agency visit. It was the day after I signed. I was still in the hospital. Your parents were supposed to meet with the social worker in another room. Elaine came to the doorway of mine by herself. I felt cold in a way the air conditioning could not explain. "She came to your room?" Ruth nodded. "She was young, scared. I was scared too. She asked if she could see me. I said yes because I thought she wanted to thank me, or ask about your health, or maybe just look at the woman who had made her a mother. But she didn't ask about me. She asked me not to make the name matter." I had to lean back against the wall. A hanger pressed into my shoulder, and I barely felt it. "What does that mean?" Ruth's mouth trembled once. She said, "We're naming her Claire. Please don't make her carry a ghost name." Those were her words. I remember because I had been awake for almost 2 days, and that sentence went through me like a needle. Outside the door, someone laughed loudly in the hallway, then moved on. Inside, I was hearing Elaine's speech again. Held her first in every way that mattered. Birth mother, real mother. The words rearranged themselves around this new thing. Elaine had not erased Ruth because she did not know Ruth had once mattered. Elaine had erased Ruth because she knew exactly where Ruth had stood. Ruth reached into her purse, then stopped herself. "I have a little bracelet from the hospital with the name written on it. I brought it because I thought maybe, after the wedding, if there was a quiet morning, I could show you. But I'm not telling you because of the bracelet. I'm telling you because when Elaine called herself your birth mother tonight, I realized she wasn't confused. She has always known I was there. I did not ask to see the bracelet. I could not have looked at it and stayed upright. The room was already full enough with Elaine at a hospital doorway, asking a 19-year-old girl to make herself smaller before the baby was even gone. "Why didn't you tell me when we first met?" I asked. It came out rawer than I meant. Ruth accepted the hurt in it. "Because you were happy to find me, and terrified of hurting her. Both things were on your face every time you said her name. I told myself I could be careful. I told myself careful was kind." I pressed my palms against my eyes. Behind them, I saw every small concession I had made over the past 8 months. Ruth meeting me for coffee 2 towns over because Elaine might feel ambushed. Ruth agreeing not to post a photo. Ruth telling me, again and again, that she did not need a title. I had called that generosity. Maybe some of it was, but some of it was Ruth stepping around a line Elaine had drawn before I could talk. A knock hit the door, 2 quick taps. Elaine did not wait for an answer. "Claire," she said through the wood, bright enough for any passerby to hear. "People are noticing." Ruth closed her eyes. I opened mine. For the first time that night, I did not feel torn between 2 mothers. I felt the old, familiar fear on one side and a plain fact on the other. Elaine had raised me. Ruth had lost me. Both things were true. But only one woman was outside the door trying to decide how much truth I was allowed to hear. I turned the knob before I could lose my nerve. Elaine stood inches away, still holding one champagne glass. Ben was behind her with his phone in his hand, not using it, just waiting. A waiter had paused near the corner with a tray of coffee cups, pretending not to listen. Elaine looked past me into the coat room. "Are we done?" "No," I said. "We're going to my room upstairs." Her expression changed so fast I almost missed the fear under the anger. "Claire, don't be dramatic." I stepped into the hallway, and Ruth stepped out behind me. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm making sure she gets to finish a sentence." Elaine followed us to the elevator and hit the up button before I could, like even the direction of my escape belonged to her. Ruth stopped beside me with both hands folded around her small evening bag, and for one awful second I felt 12 years old again, waiting for Elaine to decide whether I had embarrassed her enough to earn silence in the car. But Ben stepped between us and the dining room, not touching anyone, just filling the space. "I'll tell them Claire needed a minute," he said. Elaine snapped, "This is family." Ben looked at me, not at her. "Claire decides who that means tonight." The elevator doors opened. I took Ruth's arm and walked in before Elaine could wedge herself beside us. Elaine's face changed when the doors started to close. It was not sadness. It was panic, dressed up as injury. "Claire," she said, sharp and low, "do not do this to me in front of everyone." The doors shut on her hand, rising toward the gap, and the last thing I saw was the gold flash of her ring, the same ring that had left a red crescent on my shoulder minutes earlier. The elevator hummed upward. Neither Ruth nor I spoke. There was a mirrored wall behind us, and I saw myself in it in pieces. Loose hair, flushed neck, mascara smudged under one eye. White rehearsal dress wrinkled where I had gripped the skirt. Ruth stood half a step away, careful not to claim too much room. That almost broke me more than Elaine's speech had. Elaine had filled every corner of the night. Ruth was trying not to breathe too loudly. When we reached my floor, I led Ruth down the hallway past ice machines and framed prints of Ohio barns that looked like they had never existed anywhere real. My hands shook so badly I missed the key slot twice. Ruth said, "Claire, we can wait." I said, "No." It came out harder than I meant. I softened my voice and tried again. "No. If we wait, I'll start hearing her voice in my head instead of yours." Inside the room, Ben's suit jacket was on the chair, and my veil hung from the closet door in its garment bag. The room smelled like hairspray, hotel soap, and the lilies Elaine had insisted were bridal enough for the welcome table. Ruth stopped just inside the door, as if she needed permission to cross the carpet. I shut the door, locked it, and put the chain on. The small metal slide sounded louder than it should have. Ruth sat on the edge of the bed and opened her evening bag. She did not reach in right away. She looked at the carpet, then at me. "I need you to understand something before I show you," she said. "I did not bring this to win." I stood by the dresser with my arms wrapped around myself. "Then why did you bring it?" Ruth's mouth trembled once. "Because if I died without letting you see that you had a name from me, I would have left Elaine in charge of that truth forever." She took out a folded square of tissue, the kind used in gift boxes, soft and white and creased at the edges. Inside it was a hospital bracelet, yellowed with age, flattened from being kept somewhere safe for decades. The plastic had gone cloudy. The writing was still dark enough to read. Baby girl Harlan. Under it, in smaller handwriting, was Lila. I did not touch it at first. I stared at the 5 letters until they stopped looking like a name and started looking like a door. Lila had been real for 2 days. Not an idea, not a secret, not a weapon Ruth had saved for a dramatic moment. A nurse had written it. Someone had fastened it around my ankle. Ruth had looked at me and used that sound. Then Elaine had walked into my life and treated the sound like a threat. Ruth held the bracelet out on her palm. You don't have to take it. That was the difference between them. Clear enough to hurt. Elaine handed me love like a contract with tiny print. Ruth offered me one fragile piece of plastic and gave me the choice to leave it where it was. I reached out and picked it up. It was almost weightless. That made me angry in a way I could not explain. Something so small had scared my mother for 30 years. I sat beside Ruth, leaving a careful space between us. Did you call me that? I asked. Ruth nodded. Yes. Her voice was quiet, but it did not hide. Only when we were alone. I didn't know if I was allowed. The nurses told me not to make it harder on myself. She swallowed. But I had already named you before I signed. I thought a name was the only thing I could give you that no one could take before the papers were final. She looked at the bracelet in my hand. I was wrong about that last part. A knock hit the door so hard the chain trembled. Ruth flinched. I closed my fingers around the bracelet. Not because I was afraid Ruth would take it back, but because the sound at the door made my body choose a side before my mind caught up. Elaine's voice came through the wood. Claire, open this door. I stood up slowly. The old habit was to obey before the second knock. I could feel it moving through me, looking for my hand. I went to the door but did not open it. What do you need? I asked. Elaine lowered her voice, which meant someone else might be nearby. I need you to stop making a scene. I looked back at Ruth, sitting on the bed with her bag in her lap and her shoulders tight. The only scene in that hallway was Elaine refusing to let a closed door stay closed. I'm not coming down yet, I said. Ruth and I are talking. Elaine made a sound like a laugh with no humor in it. She has had 8 months to talk to you. She chose tonight for a reason. That landed in a tender place because part of me had wondered the same thing. Ruth heard it. Her face changed, but she did not defend herself through the door. She did not ask me to believe her louder. She waited, and that waiting forced me to decide whose silence I trusted. I looked at the bracelet again. Ruth had planned to show me after the wedding. Elaine had dragged the truth into the room with a microphone and a lie. That difference mattered. Mom, I said through the door, and the word felt wrong and familiar at the same time. You called yourself my birth mother in front of Ruth. There was a pause. Not long enough for guilt. Long enough for calculation. It was a speech, Elaine said. People say emotional things in speeches. My throat tightened. You also said you held me first in every way that mattered. Elaine answered fast. Because I did. Ruth's eyes lowered. That small movement did more to me than if she had sobbed. I unlocked the chain before I knew I was going to do it. But I kept my foot braced behind the door and opened it only a few inches. Elaine stood there with Marcy half hidden behind her, both of them holding their purses like they had marched upstairs for a rescue. Elaine's cheeks were bright, and her smile appeared the second she saw my face. It was the smile she used when other people were watching. There you are, she said. Come downstairs. Ben's poor aunt thinks you're sick. I'm not sick, I said. I'm angry. Marcy's eyes flicked past me into the room. Honey, this is a lot the night before your wedding. I looked at her until she looked away. Then stop adding to it. Elaine's smile disappeared. Do not speak to Marcy that way. And there it was, the old switch. Elaine could lie about my birth in a crowded room, but my tone was the emergency. I opened the door wider, just enough for Elaine to see Ruth on the bed and the bracelet in my hand. Elaine's eyes went straight to it. Not confused. Not curious. Recognizing. She did not ask what it was. She did not say, "Where did that come from?" Her face went still in a way I had never seen before, as if the room had tilted, and she was the only one trying not to slide. I did not need a confession right then. I had her first true reaction, and it was not grief. It was fear. You knew, I said. Elaine's chin lifted. I knew a young woman was trying to make a terrible day harder for everyone. Ruth stood up behind me, but she did not come to the door. Elaine, she said, and my mother's name sounded different in Ruth's mouth. Older. I was 19. I had just signed my baby away. Marcy whispered. Elaine, maybe we should go. Elaine ignored her. Her eyes stayed on me. Claire, give that back to her. The command was so naked that even Marcy stopped moving. I looked down at the bracelet resting against my palm. The plastic edge had left a faint line across my skin. For the first time all night, Elaine had said exactly what she wanted without wrapping it in sacrifice. She did not want me comforted. She wanted the name out of my hand. No, I said. It was one syllable, but it changed the air. Elaine blinked as if I had slapped her. I did not raise my voice. I did not explain the name. I did not defend Ruth. I simply stepped back into the room with the bracelet still in my hand and kept my body between Elaine and Ruth. I'm keeping it for tonight, I said, and you are going back downstairs without us. Elaine stared at me, and for a moment I thought she might push the door open. Then Ben appeared at the end of the hall, walking fast. His tie loosened and his expression hard in a way I had never seen aimed at anyone in my family. He stopped beside Elaine, looked at my face, then at the chain hanging loose against the door. Claire, he said, steady and low. The minister just asked me why your mother told him Ruth should be removed from the ceremony seating. Ben's words hit the room so hard that even Elaine stopped reaching for the bracelet. The minister had not misunderstood a seating question. My mother had tried to have Ruth removed from my wedding ceremony while I was upstairs, learning that Ruth had once named me Lila. For a few seconds, nobody moved. Ruth sat very still on the edge of the bed. Marcy stared at Elaine like she had walked into the wrong room by mistake. And I stood between the two women who had both held me as a baby, with a yellowed hospital bracelet curled in my fist like it had a pulse. Elaine recovered first. She turned toward Ben with that sharp little laugh she used when a waiter brought the wrong wine. That is not what happened, she said. I asked a practical question. This is a church ceremony. There are family rows. There are expectations. Ben did not step into the room. He stayed at the doorway, calm and square-shouldered, blocking the hallway behind him. He said you told him Ruth would upset Claire if she sat near the front. Elaine's chin lifted. She is upsetting Claire. I looked down at my own hand. My fingers were shaking, but the bracelet stayed there. I'm upset because you lied to me, I said. Not because Ruth is here. That sentence changed the air more than shouting would have. Elaine's face tightened, not with guilt, but with offense, as if I had broken a rule in front of company. You are overwrought, she said. You just heard something emotional, and now everyone is feeding it. Ruth flinched at the word everyone, like she had been made too large and too dangerous by standing in a guest room with empty hands. Ben glanced at me, not asking permission to protect me, just checking whether I wanted room to speak. I did. I had spent so many years letting Elaine translate my feelings before I even had them. That night, for the first time, I heard my own voice before hers could cover it. Call him back, I said. Elaine blinked. Excuse me? The minister. Call him back up here, or I'll go downstairs. Marcy shifted near the dresser. Claire, honey, maybe this is not the moment to involve. It already involves him, I said, and I surprised myself by not sounding angry. I sounded tired, which scared Elaine more. My ceremony seating is not a side conversation. Ruth is staying. She is sitting where I put her. Elaine's eyes moved to Ben. You see what you've done? Ben's voice stayed low. I asked Claire what she wanted. No, Elaine snapped. You waited until she was vulnerable and then you pushed. That was the old move. If I chose something Elaine disliked, someone else must have planted it in me. I walked past her before she could build the rest of that cage. The hallway outside the room was narrow and warm from all the bodies downstairs. I could hear silverware, a burst of laughter, the soft lift of a piano from the restaurant below. It was strange how normal the world sounded while mine was being rearranged. Ben followed me. And Ruth came last. Slower. As if she expected Elaine to order her back into the room. Elaine did not order Ruth back. Elaine came after us, heels striking the carpet with clipped, furious precision. Marcy came too, but without her earlier confidence. At the top of the stairs, Ben touched my elbow. You don't have to do this in front of everyone, he said. I know. I looked over the railing. Below us, my rehearsal dinner waited in warm light, with place cards and candles and people who thought the hard part of the weekend was over. Near the coat room, Reverend Paul stood with his black suit jacket folded over one arm and a paper program in his hand. He looked up and saw all 5 of us at once. His expression told me he had already understood enough to wish he had gone home 10 minutes earlier. I did not march down like a bride in a movie. I held the banister because my knees felt loose. Halfway down, Elaine said my name behind me, soft enough that only I could hear it. That softness had worked on me all my life. It meant, don't embarrass me. It meant, remember who raised you. It meant, come back before anyone sees the split. I kept going. When Reverend Paul stepped toward me, I saw him glance at Ruth, then at Elaine, then at me. Claire, he said gently, I'm sorry. I was trying to prevent a misunderstanding. Then let's prevent one, I said. Ruth Harlan is invited to my wedding. She will not be moved out of the ceremony because anyone is uncomfortable. Reverend Paul nodded once, but he looked at Elaine before he answered. That small glance hurt more than it should have. Even now, people look to Elaine to see whether my words counted. Elaine used the opening. Reverend, this is a deeply sensitive matter, she said. Claire is emotional tonight. I am her mother, and I know what will overwhelm her tomorrow. I turned around on the stair landing. Guests were not watching yet, but the noise at the nearest tables had softened. We were on the edge of public, not fully in it, and Elaine knew exactly how to use that border. She could make me seem unstable without ever raising her voice. Before I could answer, Ruth did something I did not expect. She stepped down one stair so she was beside Elaine instead of behind me. Her hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. I can sit anywhere Claire wants, Ruth said to the minister. Back row, side aisle, wherever. I am not here to take anything. Elaine exhaled as if that proved her point. But Ruth kept going, and her voice did not shake. But please don't tell people I upset her just by being visible. The plainness of that sentence stripped the room clean. It was not a demand. It was a human being asking not to be treated like a contamination. Marcy looked down at the carpet. Reverend Paul's face softened. Elaine's did not. You don't understand the position you put us in, Elaine said to Ruth. You arrived at the most important weekend of our lives, carrying that thing and a story that can only hurt my daughter. I lifted my hand. The bracelet was still tucked in my palm. You keep calling it a thing, I said. It has my first hospital name on it. Elaine's mouth tightened. Your name is Claire. Yes, I said, and that should have been strong enough to survive me knowing Lila existed. That was the first time I said the name in front of Elaine. Not as an accusation, not as proof, just as a small fact with room around it. Elaine's eyes filled so fast that, for one old reflexive second, I almost apologized. I almost touched her arm and made it easier for her. Then I saw Ruth standing with her shoulders braced for rejection, and I saw Ben waiting at the bottom of the stairs, trusting me to choose myself without pulling me either way. I let Elaine's tears stay where they were. Reverend Paul cleared his throat. Claire, tell me what you want for tomorrow. The question was simple, but it landed like a door opening. I did not look at Elaine. I did not look at Ruth. I looked at the man who would ask me in less than a day whether I had come freely to marry Ben. I want Ruth seated in the front section, I said. Not hidden, not explained away. Elaine can sit where she was going to sit. No one has to trade places. No one has to perform anything. Elaine made a small sound. I kept my eyes on the minister. And if anyone tells you a change is for my comfort, you ask me. Not my mother. Me. Reverend Paul folded the program once, carefully, like he needed something to do with his hands. Then that is what we'll do. The answer was quiet, but it was official enough. For the first time that night, a piece of my wedding moved because I had spoken, not because Elaine had arranged it ahead of me. I felt relief, but it was not soft relief. It was sharp, almost painful, like blood coming back into a limb. Elaine stepped closer. If you do this, she said, people will ask questions. I turned to her then. Let them ask me. You have no idea how cruel people can be. I know how lonely secrets are, I said. That stopped her. Not forever, maybe not even for a minute, but long enough for me to see the fear under her anger, and long enough to understand that fear could be real without being allowed to drive my life. A server appeared at the foot of the stairs with a tray of untouched champagne flutes, saw our faces, and froze. Ben took the tray from him with a polite nod and set it on the side table. It was such an ordinary gesture that I almost laughed. My fiancé, clearing space for a family rupture beside a bowl of matchbooks and dinner mints. Then he came to me and said, "Do you want to go outside for a minute?" I wanted air so badly that my chest hurt. Elaine reached for me as I passed her. Not hard. Just 2 fingers on my sleeve, the way she used to stop me in store aisles when I drifted too far. "Claire," she whispered, and there was no audience in her voice now. "Please don't punish me tomorrow." I looked at her hand on my sleeve. Then I gently removed it. "I'm not punishing you," I said. "I'm stopping you." Her face changed, as if I had slapped her. But I had not. I had only named the difference she had spent my whole life blurring. Ben opened the side door near the coat room, and cold night air moved across my face. I stepped outside with him, still holding the hospital bracelet. Behind us, through the glass, Elaine stood on the stair, landing with Marcy beside her, and Ruth 1 step below, all 3 of them suspended in the warm restaurant light. Then Ruth looked through the door at me, not asking to follow, not asking to be chosen again. She just lifted one hand, small and steady, and waited to see whether I would come back in. Ben reached for my hand on the hotel patio, and I flinched because the hospital bracelet was cutting into my palm. He stopped like I had told him to stop, even though I hadn't said a word. Behind the glass, the lobby still glowed warm and expensive, all candles and flowers, and people pretending they had not watched my mother try to erase another woman in real time. Ruth stood near the elevator with one hand lifted, waiting to see if I would come back. Elaine was turned away from her, rigid as a statue in pearls. Ben looked at the bracelet, then at my face. "Do you want me to hold it?" he asked. Not, "Do you want me to fix this?" Not, "Do you want me to tell them off?" Just that. I opened my hand. The old plastic had left a white line across my skin. For 1 second, I wanted to hand the bracelet to him and let him carry the weight of it. Then I closed my fingers around it again. "No," I said. "I think I need to know I can hold it without apologizing." Ben nodded once. He didn't praise me for being strong. He just stood beside me while I learned what my own hand felt like. The patio smelled like wet stone, and the lemon trees the hotel kept in big black pots. Down the street, someone laughed too loudly outside a bar, and the normal sound made me feel unreal. Tomorrow I was supposed to put on a white dress, walk toward Ben, and become someone's wife. But right then, the harder thing was walking back through that glass door as myself. Ben leaned his shoulder against the wall. "What do you want before tomorrow starts?" he asked. "Not what keeps everyone calm. What do you want?" I looked through the glass at Ruth's raised hand. "I want 10 minutes with her in the morning," I said. "Before hair, before makeup, before anybody gets to narrate it for me." When we went back inside, the lobby had gone quiet in that strange way. Rooms get quiet after people have said too much. Ruth lowered her hand as I came toward her. Elaine saw me moving and took one fast step, but Marcy touched her elbow. It was not a strong touch. It was not a rescue. It was just enough to make Elaine pause, and that tiny hesitation told me Marcy had finally seen something she could not explain away. I stopped in front of Ruth. "Would you meet me downstairs tomorrow morning?" I asked. 7. Just coffee. Ruth's eyes filled, but she kept her hands at her sides. "Yes," she said. "Only if you still want it when you wake up." That answer did something to me. It left me room. Elaine made a small sound behind me, almost a laugh and almost a gasp. "Claire, you have a full bridal schedule tomorrow." She said it like the schedule was a fence around me. I turned back, tired enough that fear no longer had a sharp edge. "Then I'll start it 10 minutes later." Saw just still near the desk, pretending to study his folder. Ben stood close enough for me to feel him there, but not close enough to speak for me. Elaine looked from him to Ruth to me, searching for the weak place in the room. "You'll regret making everything so complicated the night before your wedding," she said. "Maybe," I said, "but I already regret letting simple things cost me the truth." I slept almost none. I lay in the hotel bed with the bracelet on the nightstand beside a glass of water, and every time the elevator hummed outside my room, I thought Elaine had come back to knock. She didn't. That was somehow worse. Silence from Elaine had never meant peace. It meant she had gone somewhere inside herself to reorganize. At 6:40, I got dressed in jeans and a sweater, put the bracelet in the small inner pocket of my purse, and went downstairs before I could lose my nerve. The lobby looked different in morning light. The flowers from the rehearsal dinner had browned at the edges. The candles were gone. No one was performing yet. Ruth was already there with 2 paper cups of coffee and a little dish of creamers between them. She stood when she saw me, then sat back down before the gesture could become too much. I appreciated that more than she could have known. We took the small table near the window, away from the front desk. For a minute, neither of us spoke. I watched her twist the paper sleeve on her cup, and I realized my hands did the same thing when I was nervous. It was the first resemblance between us that did not feel like a theft from Elaine. It was just a small, human echo. "I don't know what I'm allowed to ask you," I said. Ruth gave a sad little smile. "You're allowed to ask anything. I may not answer beautifully." That made me laugh once, and the laugh surprised both of us. I took the bracelet out and placed it between the coffee cups. Ruth did not touch it. She looked at the name she had written years ago, and her face changed in a way that made me look away for a second. "Did you call me that when you were alone?" I asked. Ruth nodded. "For 2 days." Her voice stayed soft. Then I signed the papers, and after that, I made myself say the baby, because names make people too real when you are trying to survive losing them. The answer hurt, but it did not demand anything from me. That was new. Elaine's pain always arrived with instructions. Ruth's pain just sat on the table and let me decide how close to get. I asked her about the name. She said she had liked how gentle it sounded, and then she stopped herself. "But you are Claire," she said. "I'm not here to rename you." I looked down at the bracelet. "I don't think I want another name," I said. "I think I just wanted to know there was a moment before everyone else decided who I was." Ruth put both hands around her coffee cup. "There was," she said, "and you were loved in it. Not well enough to keep, maybe, but loved." By the time I got upstairs, my bridal suite was already full of hairspray, garment bags, and women speaking in bright voices that did not match the hour. Elaine stood by my dress with a white satin box in her hands. She had changed into a pale blue robe with "Mother of the Bride" embroidered over her heart. The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because they were wrong, but because she wore them like armor. My bridesmaids went quiet when I came in. Ben's sister, Nora, was sitting by the window with a curling iron in one hand, watching Elaine as if she had entered a room where the stove was already smoking. "You weren't here," Elaine said. "I was having coffee." I kept my purse on my shoulder. Elaine's smile tightened. "With Ruth." She made Ruth's name sound like a stain she had decided not to mention directly. Before I could answer, she opened the satin box. Inside was a small blue ribbon tied into a bow. "I brought you something blue," she said. "I saved it from the blanket we brought you home in." The room softened around that sentence. A few bridesmaids made the little sounds people make when they think they are witnessing tenderness. For a moment, I almost stepped into the version of the scene Elaine had prepared. Then I saw the needle already threaded on the vanity. Elaine had not brought the ribbon for me to choose. She had brought it to attach to the inside of my dress, against my body, before I could say no. My stomach dropped in a slow, cold way. "You were going to sew it in?" I asked. Elaine picked up the needle. "Just inside the waist. No one will see." That was exactly the problem. She wanted to put her claim where only I would feel it. The bracelet in my purse seemed to grow heavier. I looked at the dress, then at the little blue bow. "No," I said. The room went so quiet I heard the curling iron click off. Elaine's face did not crumple, it sharpened. "Claire, don't be cruel over a piece of ribbon. I'm not wearing something you sew into my dress without asking me." My voice was steady enough that I trusted it. Elaine looked around the room, trying to recruit the air itself. "It's from your baby blanket." "Then put it in my bouquet if I ask for it," I said. "Or keep it, but you don't get to hide it inside my clothes." Nora lowered the curling iron to the table. One of my bridesmaids stared at the floor. No one rescued Elaine. That silence was not loud, but it was different from last night's silence. This time, people understood what they were hearing. Elaine set the needle down too hard. "After everything I did to make this day beautiful, you're going to deny me one private mother-daughter tradition?" The old guilt reached for me. It knew the path, it knew where to press. I almost said, "It's fine." I almost gave her the small hidden thing so the room could breathe again. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Standing by. Whatever you choose." I did not answer it. I did not need to. I looked at Elaine and said, "A tradition is not private if I'm not allowed to refuse it." The door to the suite was half open, and Ruth appeared in the hallway with a garment steamer in her hand. She must have been passing by on her way to her own room, or maybe she had come because she heard voices. She saw the ribbon, the needle, my dress, and Elaine's face. Then she did the strangest and kindest thing anyone had done all morning. She looked at me, not Elaine, and asked, "Do you want me to leave?" I could feel every woman in the suite waiting for my answer. Elaine's eyes flashed with victory before I even spoke, because she thought the question itself would shame me into sending Ruth away. "No," I said. "I want you to come in." Ruth stepped inside slowly. She did not touch the dress. She did not touch me. She set the steamer down by the wall and stood near the empty chair like a guest who knew she had been invited into a room full of broken glass. Elaine laughed once, under her breath. "Of course," she said. "Of course, this is what we're doing now." I turned to Nora. "Can you help me get dressed?" Nora stood immediately. That was the second small shift of the morning. I had asked someone else for help, and the room moved with me. Elaine did not leave. She stayed while Nora zipped the back of my dress, watching every button like it was a verdict. Elaine watched Nora button the back of my dress like she was watching someone steal a prayer from her mouth. I stood facing the cloudy mirror in the bridal suite, one hand on the dresser, while Ruth stayed near the door with both palms folded tight around her purse strap. No one spoke for a minute. The room was full of satin, hairspray, and the kind of silence that makes every breath sound like an accusation. Nora's fingers were gentle but sure. She did not chatter to fill the air. She just said, "Tell me if anything pulls." That one plain sentence almost undid me, because it was the first time all morning someone touched my wedding dress without trying to write a claim inside it. Elaine still held the blue ribbon in her hand. The needle and thread were on the vanity where I had made her set them down. The ribbon looked small now, almost harmless, but I could not stop seeing the way she had planned to hide it against my skin. When Nora finished the last button, she stepped back and said, "Okay. Breathe." I did, and the dress settled around me with a soft weight. For one strange second, I looked like a bride from someone else's life. Then I saw Ruth reflected behind me, crying without making a sound, and Elaine beside the vanity with her jaw locked so tight I could see the muscle moving. Elaine said, "I should have been the one to do that." I turned from the mirror. "You could have been," I said, "if you had let it be mine." Her face changed in a quick, wounded flash. But I did not chase it. I had chased that look my whole life. I had apologized to it, softened for it, explained myself to it, and made myself smaller for it. That morning, in my wedding dress, I let the look stand there without feeding it. Ruth took one careful step forward. "Claire, I can wait outside if that helps." "No," I said. "I asked you to come in." Elaine gave a dry laugh. "Of course you did." Nora looked at me through the mirror, asking without asking if I wanted help. I shook my head once. I needed to answer this myself, while my hands were still steady. "Mom," I said to Elaine, and the word hurt more because I meant it. "If you stay in this room, you stay without punishing everyone for being here." Elaine looked down at the ribbon. For a moment I thought she might throw it at me. Instead, she held it out with 2 fingers, like it had become dirty. "Then what do you want done with this?" I looked at the strip of blue satin. It was from the baby blanket she had saved, and that part was real. The hiding was not. The stealing was not. I reached for it, but I did not hand her back the power of deciding what it meant. "I'll carry it," I said. "Not sewn into me. Not secret." Nora picked up my bouquet from the chair. It was white roses and small green leaves, already wrapped in plain ivory ribbon from the florist. I took Elaine's blue ribbon and tied it around the stems in a loose knot, right where anyone could see it if they looked. My hands trembled once, and Ruth turned her face away to give me privacy. Elaine stared at the ribbon like visibility had ruined it. Then I opened the little pocket in my purse and touched the hospital bracelet. The plastic was too old and brittle to tie to flowers or wear on my wrist. Ruth saw my hand pause there, and she whispered, "You don't have to carry that anywhere today." "I know," I said. "That was why I did." I slipped the bracelet into the small satin purse Nora handed me and closed the clasp. It was not proof I planned to show. It was not a weapon. It was a piece of me that had existed before anyone in that room had agreed on what to call me. A knock came at the suite door. Ben's sister cracked it open just enough for her husband, Mark, to speak from the hallway without looking in. "They're ready for us," he said. "The cars are downstairs." The ride from the hotel to the church took less than 12 minutes. but it felt like crossing from one life into another. Elaine sat in the front car without speaking to me. Ruth rode separately because she had insisted she did not want to make the ride harder. But when I saw her car pull in behind ours, I felt my shoulders drop for the first time all morning. The church looked exactly as it had during rehearsal. Pale stone steps, heavy wooden doors, white flowers tied to the aisle ends, a string trio practicing the same 4 measures again and again. Nothing outside knew what had changed. Inside, everything had. By the time I stepped into the church corridor with my bouquet in one hand and the satin purse in the other, the air smelled like old carpet, lemon polish, and candle wax. Somewhere beyond the double doors, guests murmured under the music. Reverend Paul stood near the vestibule, looking more nervous than any minister should look before a wedding. Marcy came in from the hallway and stopped when she saw Ruth standing near the front entrance with her small purse held against her side. For once, Marcy did not smooth anything over. She just said, "You look beautiful, Claire." And then she looked at Elaine. "The front row is filling." Elaine's eyes snapped up. "With whom?" Marcy swallowed. "With the people Claire asked to have there." That sentence landed harder than a shout. Elaine's face went still. Then she walked past Ruth without touching her, past Nora without thanking her, and out toward the sanctuary doors. I heard her heels strike the floor too fast. I should have felt relief. Instead, my stomach dropped, because Elaine moved like someone who had stopped trying to persuade and started trying to force. Ruth felt it too. She looked at me and said, "I'll go sit down now." I wanted to ask her to stay until the last second. I wanted to ask her to stand where Elaine had always stood. But Ruth had given me one gift over and over since I met her. She did not make me responsible for her wanting, so I nodded. "Front section," I said, "where Reverend Paul knows you're supposed to be." Ruth smiled, small and shaky. "I'll be there." When she left, the corridor felt larger and emptier at the same time. Nora crouched to fasten the tiny buckle on my left shoe, and I almost laughed because I was 28 years old and suddenly could not manage a shoe strap. "This is ridiculous," I said. "No," Nora said. "This is a wedding." That brought me back to Ben. In all the noise around mothers and names and rows of chairs, I had almost lost the simple fact that he was waiting at the end of the aisle. Not waiting to rescue me. Not waiting to own the moment. Just waiting because we had chosen each other before this day became a courtroom for everyone else's fear. Reverend Paul saw me and came over quickly. "Claire," he said, keeping his voice low, "I need to ask you directly." Those words steadied me because he had learned. "Ask." He glanced toward the sanctuary doors. "Elaine is saying she is not comfortable being seated unless Ruth is moved behind the family row." Nora made a sound under her breath. Marcy, standing a few feet away with a program in her hand, closed her eyes like she had been expecting exactly this, and still hoped it would not happen. I looked at Reverend Paul. "Did Ruth sit where I asked?" "Yes." "Then nothing changes." He nodded once. "All right." But Elaine was not done. She stepped out from the side hall, already dressed in her pale silver mother-of-the-bride suit, her corsage pinned perfectly at her shoulder. Her face looked calm from a distance. Up close, her eyes were wet and furious. "Claire," she said, "do not make me sit there while that woman is treated like your mother in front of everyone I know." The hallway shrank around us. A bridesmaid stopped pretending not to listen. Mark looked down at the floor. Reverend Paul held his program against his chest like a shield. I kept my voice low, because I would not give Elaine the public scene she was daring me to create. "Ruth is not being treated like my mother instead of you. She is being treated like someone who belongs in the truth." Elaine's mouth trembled. "I am the one who stayed." "I know," I said. "And I am not erasing that." "You are," she said. "You are doing it with every choice this morning." That old pull rose in me, the terrible instinct to fix her pain before I even understood my own. I almost said, "I'm sorry." I almost promised something. Then my fingers tightened around the bouquet stems, and the blue ribbon brushed my palm, visible and loose, and not hidden anywhere. "I'm getting married now," I said. "You can sit in the front row as my mother, or you can choose not to, but you cannot make Ruth disappear as the price of showing up." Elaine stared at me as if I had spoken in a language she refused to learn. Then she looked at Reverend Paul. "If you let this happen, I won't walk in." No one moved. That was the moment everyone expected me to break, because Elaine had finally placed herself between me and the ceremony. Not by blocking a door, not by raising her voice, by making her presence the toll. Reverend Paul started to say my name, but I lifted my hand. She doesn't walk me in, I said. No one does. Marcy's head turned sharply. Nora looked at me, not shocked, just ready. Elaine whispered, Claire. I met her eyes. I'm not being given away. The music inside shifted. The doors opened a few inches, and a wave of faces turned toward the back of the church. I could see the aisle now, bright with candles at the ends of the pews. I could see Ben at the front, already looking for me. And in the first section, on the aisle where I had asked her to sit, Ruth Harlan stood with one hand pressed to her chest, not reaching for me, not claiming me, just there. Nora moved behind me and lifted my train off the floor. I've got the dress, she said. I took one step toward the open doors, with Elaine behind me and both my names somewhere in the small purse against my hip. I was halfway down the aisle when the side door opened, and for one sharp second I thought Elaine had chosen my wedding as the place to make me pay. The whole sanctuary seemed to hear that small click. My hand tightened around the bouquet, and the blue ribbon brushed my wrist where she had wanted it hidden. Ben did not look toward the door. He kept his eyes on me, steady and waiting, like the aisle was not a test I had to pass but a distance he trusted me to cross. I did look. I could not help it. Elaine stood in the side aisle, with one hand pressed to her stomach, and the other gripping her small silver clutch. Her face was pale under her makeup, and Marcy stood 2 steps behind her, not touching her, not guiding her, just giving her the room to decide. Elaine's eyes found mine. For a breath, everything in me braced for the old signal, the one that meant, come fix this, come prove you love me, come make me the only mother in the room. I did not stop walking. That was the first miracle of that day. My feet kept moving under the dress. Nora's hand stayed light on my train behind me. The guests turned forward again because I gave them nothing to watch except a bride walking toward her groom. Elaine stood frozen for 3 more steps of mine, and then she moved into the front pew. She did not take Ruth's place. She did not ask anyone to shift. She sat at the aisle end, leaving the space beside Ruth exactly as it was, and she put her clutch in her lap with both hands locked over it. When I reached the front, Ben stepped down from the little platform instead of making me climb to him. It was such a small thing, but it nearly broke me. He offered his hand palm up, not reaching to pull, not closing the distance for me. I put my hand in his. He squeezed once, and I felt the shake in his fingers. Hi, he whispered, barely moving his mouth. I laughed under my breath because it was the only word in the world simple enough for that moment. Hi. Reverend Paul waited until I faced him. He had changed something. I could tell by the way his thumb rested on the edge of his folder instead of inside the page. He did not look at Elaine. He did not look at Ruth. He looked at me and Ben. We are gathered here, he began, and his voice carried softly through the sanctuary. Not to transfer Claire from one life into another, but to witness the life she and Ben are choosing together. A ripple moved through the room, not a gasp, not gossip, just people adjusting to the truth spoken plainly. My chest loosened. No one had given me away. No one had taken me. I was standing there because I had walked. The ceremony went on, and it was not perfect. Nothing that honest ever is. Elaine cried in the front row with her chin held too high, trying to make the tears look dignified. Ruth kept her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles went white. Ben's mother sniffled loudly at the wrong time, and one of his nephews dropped a little program, then tried to pick it up with his shoe. Life kept being life, even while mine was changing. Then Reverend Paul reached the place where the old wording would have been. My body knew it before my mind did. I felt Elaine lift her face. I felt Ruth go still. I felt every story people had told about me crowd the air for one last chance to decide who I belonged to. Reverend Paul closed the folder. He did not read. He asked, Claire, do you come to this marriage freely? As yourself? The question landed harder than any speech could have. It did not ask who had raised me. It did not ask who had lost me. It did not ask who had the older claim or the deeper wound. It asked if I was standing there as a person who could choose. I heard my own voice before I felt brave. I do. Ben's thumb moved across the side of my hand. Reverend Paul turned to him. Ben, do you receive Claire as herself, without asking her to make any part of her life disappear? Ben did not rush. He looked at me, and in that pause I saw he understood the weight of the answer. I do, he said. Then softer, just for me. All of you. I had promised myself I would not look back again. I almost kept that promise. But when Reverend Paul asked us to turn toward our families for the blessing, I saw Ruth first. She was crying without trying to hide it, but she did not reach out. She did not mouth anything. She simply stood where I had asked her to stand. Then I saw Elaine. Her lips were pressed together, and for one terrible second I thought she would stay seated and make her silence the loudest thing in the room. Marcy touched the back of the pew. Not Elaine. Just the wood. Elaine looked down at that hand, then at Ruth, then at me. Slowly, as if every inch cost her something, Elaine stood. She did not smile. She did not pretend this was easy. But she stood in the front row with Ruth already standing beside her, and for the first time that day, neither woman moved away. That was the moment I married Ben in my heart, even before the vows were done. Not because Elaine had suddenly become gracious. Not because Ruth had been restored to some beautiful place history had kept warm for her. It was because the room had finally stopped asking me to shrink my life into one clean answer. Elaine was there. Ruth was there. Ben was there. And I was not splitting myself down the middle to make the picture easier. The vows were short because I could not have survived long ones. Ben promised to tell me the truth kindly and early. I promised not to disappear into peacekeeping when truth was needed. Our voices shook. The rings almost slipped because my hands were damp. When Reverend Paul pronounced us married, Ben kissed me carefully at first, like he was asking one more time, and I kissed him back hard enough that his sister whooped from behind me. People stood. The organ started. The sound filled the sanctuary in a way that made the floor vibrate under my shoes. Ben and I turned to walk out together. I thought Elaine might reach for me as I passed. I thought Ruth might say my name. Neither did. Elaine put one hand over her mouth. Ruth pressed two fingers to her own lips, then let them fall. Their restraint was not warm exactly, but it was real. For that day, real was enough. In the small room off the sanctuary, everyone seemed to arrive at once. Nora lifted my veil before I could ask. Ben shut the door just long enough to give us 10 seconds without an audience. He touched the ribbon on my bouquet with one finger. "You okay?" he asked. I thought about lying because brides are supposed to glow, not tremble. Instead I said, "I'm here." He nodded like that, answered everything. The door opened before he could kiss me again. Elaine stood there alone. Her mascara had given up, and she looked older than she had that morning. For once, she did not enter without permission. "May I come in?" she asked. The words were stiff, almost formal, but they were the first doorway she had ever offered me instead of walking through. I said yes. Ben stepped back but did not leave. Elaine noticed that too. She looked at the bouquet, at the ribbon tied in a clean knot where everyone could see it. "I wanted it close to you," she said. Her voice caught. I was wrong to decide where. I held the bouquet between us, not as a shield, but as the thing we could both bear to look at. "I know you wanted to be my mother today," I said. "You were. But you were not the only truth in the room." Elaine flinched, and I thought she might argue. Instead she swallowed. "I don't know how to do this," she said. That was the most honest thing she had given me all week. I reached for her hand, then stopped before I touched her. She saw me stop. After a moment, she placed her hand lightly over mine, not gripping, not claiming, just there. "Then we start with not hiding things inside my dress," I said. A broken little laugh came out of her, and then she cried for real. Ruth did not come into that room. I saw her later in the receiving line, standing near the end like someone prepared to be skipped. When I reached her, she said, "You were beautiful." Nothing more. I hugged her because I wanted to, not because the day required it. Her shoulder shook once under my cheek, and then she let go first. That was the visible consequence of everything I had chosen. No one vanished, and no one got to take over. Elaine stood in photographs where my mother belonged. Ruth stood in 2 of them because I asked her to. In one picture, Ben and I stood between them, but I did not let the photographer arrange their hands on me. I held my bouquet myself. By the time we left the reception, my feet hurt, my lipstick was gone, and the satin purse with the hospital bracelet inside was tucked under my arm. Ben went ahead to hold the car door. I paused on the curb with my bouquet in one hand and my shoes in the other, and the blue ribbon trailed down just far enough to brush the new ring on my finger. For the first time all weekend, nothing was hidden against my skin. My mother's ribbon was in the open. Ruth's bracelet was in my purse because I had chosen to carry it. Ben was waiting beside the car without rushing me. I looked back once at the church doors, not to see who followed, but to see that I had walked out of them whole. Then I got into the car with both my names, both my truths, and no one's hand on my shoulder telling me where to stand.